what you are, what you wear, well, well. You know what you are, you don't keep it.
You've got certain prog bands who, like Yes, for example, sort of had a sort of 3-album period of which I think was the Yes album, Fragile, and Close to the Edge, which, you know, these are 3 classic albums in a row. But with Genesis, I mean, you got a much bigger bank of quality material.
It was a very crucial, very important step forward for Genesis. One interesting point is that right away, as soon as you listen to it, comparing it to previous albums, is that you can actually hear Peter Gabriel's vocals coming through loud and clear. Much better production, much better sound quality. But oddly enough, despite that, they've progressed in the studio in that sense. Technically a much more proficient album, and yet somehow lacking some of the magic of, say, Foxtrot or Trespass or Nursery Crime. They had to move on, of course, but it didn't, despite the fact that they had set-piece arrangements again, like Cinema Show. It didn't quite have the quality of genius that the early albums had.
I mean, musically, it was certainly a carry-on from Nursery Crime and Foxtrot, but I think the songs were more cleverly integrated, and it wasn't that it was a concept album; they just seemed to follow on very, very well. And you know, that is as much as arranging the tracks in order. In other words, finding your track listing when you're first putting your album together. Something as simple as that can actually make the difference between a good album and an extremely good album. And I think they got it right with this one. You've got songs like, you know, the Battle of Epping Forest and, you know, Dancing Out with the Moonlight Night. Classic stuff. Very, very, very good album. I think one of the best albums of the 70s.
Of course, I suppose the important aspects of Selling England by the Pound were that they had their first hit single, which was I Know What I Like and Your Wardrobe.
lunch. Humpty-Dumpty-Dum. When the sun beats down, they lie on the bench. You can always move on time.
I Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe could have been a bigger single if Genesis had actually appeared on Top of the Pops. They never did. Nobody's quite sure whether it's because they refused, which I think they like to tell people they did, or whether they just couldn't fit it into their touring commitments. It was a song that had the slightly off-kilter appeal of something that maybe Jethro Tull might have done, Living in the Past, the same kind of hop, skip and a jump that the best Jethro Tull had. And it was a song that I think succeeded as a single, but the fans could still like. You've got to realise that Genesis fans were certainly album-buying fans. They weren't people who bought 7-inch singles by The Sweet or Gary Glitter. And in many ways, perhaps going on Top of the Pops would have been a retrograde step for Genesis because they'd have risked alienating the fans who stuck with them from the beginning. Of course, when Phil Collins took over as the singer, they'd be more or less 60s on Top of the Pops, but that was another chapter to come. From this point onwards, Genesis could certainly claim to be a singles band as well as an albums band.
There's always been echo. Chicken, wake up, you got to tidy your hook now. But then Mr. Lewis was in the time when he was out of his own. Over the garden wall, to the lovebird, keep them on the big shop.
I mean, I Know What I Like was a very clever ditty of a single almost, and it was typical of Genesis in many ways with the vocal, the lyrics, and the way they put it together musically. Personally, it's not my favourite on the album, but I can see why they chose it as a single, and I think it was a very, very good choice as a single, and it works well on the album.
That song emerged from jamming around on a rather poppy riff that I think had been lying around for a while. But suddenly the right kind of lyrics seemed to appear, a couple of ideas sprang from the original riff, and they just let it run and let it develop by itself. And the lyrics have a nice quirky touch to them, but it has its kind of quite a pop sensibility, which is something that Genesis ironically seemed to battle against half the time. It was almost like they didn't want to have a pop hit, it was almost beneath them. And yet, despite their better judgments, as it were, this song worked as a pop song. It got to just outside the top 20.
They lay out the couch, can I always see them talk? Me? I'm just a lawnmower. Don't tell me about the way I walk.
Selling England by the Pound was undoubtedly a masterpiece, and to cap it all, there was even a hit single. By early 1975, Peter Gabriel was beginning to strain at the ties which bound him to Genesis. Gabriel was overflowing with lyrical and musical ideas, and it was becoming apparent that something would have to give. It seems that sometime in 1974, Peter Gabriel finally took the decision to leave Genesis. But before he did so, Gabriel played a major part in the creation of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Tensions were certainly growing at this time, as Gabriel wanted complete control over the lyrics and the central concept of the album. In contrast to the English subject matter of the previous albums, The Lamb told the story of a New York street punk, not always in the most cohesive manner.
The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway was scheduled to be the blockbuster. This was the album that was going to finally establish Genesis as not just a cult band playing at the local town hall, but an international group. And at the same time, it was going to be the album that would really take the basis of the group, which was creating these set-piece works like Supper's Ready, one stage further. The ultimate Supper's Ready would be The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway.
Genesis were always going to do a concept album. I don't think there was any doubt. You look at the fact that they had the enormous pieces of music like the nice Supper's Ready and so forth. They were always preparing themselves for the moment when they were going to do this concept. Every great prog rock band has it, and why not Genesis?
Most people think that Peter Gabriel wrote all the lyrics for Genesis. That wasn't actually true. It was on The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, because it was such a conceptual piece. He really did contribute more of the lyrics, in fact almost all of the lyrics as far as I know, because he was acting out a part and he wanted to put the words into his own mouth.
Most people kind of accept, including the band today, that might overstretch themselves a little bit.
Some of the costumes, I think, because there's Slipper Man, who is supposed to be sort of nastily contorted by sort of, for all sorts of reasons. There's sort of great growths all over it and everything like that. It looked great, but the music was starting to become secondary, and I think that we realised we'd gone too far at that point,
The Slipper Man was in some respects, the last straw, the visual last straw.
And it's quite a difficult concept to get your head round, but musically it's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. For a lot of people, it's their favourite Genesis album.
I don't think Gabriel's showmanship had taken over too much. I think he had probably lost interest in the band themselves. And if you listen to the music from The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, I think it shows that musically it was a little empty compared to Selling England by the Pound.
The band spent 6 months recording The Lamb. And it stretched them almost to breaking point, indeed beyond at one time when Peter Gabriel left for what he decided was going to be a better offer from the Exorcist film director William Friedkin. But this offer never actually turned up, so he was forced to return to Genesis. But in a sense, the magic between the band had been broken at that point.
All change! Feel your body melt, mum to dad, dad in the office, dad in the office. You all full of all, dad to damn, to dumb, to mum, mum to the washing, mum to the washing. Ooh, you're all full of all, let me hear your lies, leaving this up to the eye.
In many ways, the Gabriel era Genesis split up at just the right time. They went out on a high with The Lamb. I think everyone now looks on that as a real classic album. Obviously, punk rock was about to rear its spiky head, and bands like Genesis would suddenly become rather unfashionable. Certainly Peter Gabriel had said he saw that punk rock was coming. He didn't want to be a stadium band. He said, I see these bands that they were like the Emerson, Lake and Palmer's, the Jethro Tulls, as a bit of a Titanic, and I don't want to go down with that ship. So he cast adrift at probably just about the right time. And obviously Genesis, in showing that they could survive without him, it was a good result for both parties.
For many of the original fans, things would never be the same. And as Genesis forged on into the brave new world of sold-out sports stadiums, the old diehards returned to their treasured albums and took solace from an amazing body of work, which is still unsurpassed to this day.